Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 267. My name is MBZ, and I should be respectful. It's a somber occasion. It is a sad occasion, Bally, because unfortunately there has been a death in the family. It's been a long time coming. One of my best friends in the world is gone, and it just happened, and I don't know what to do about it now, Bally, and it's very sad. So you will know Bally, of course, one of my best friends in the world. It's this little Bluetooth speaker that I carry around with me everywhere. It's a UE
You
Boom
need
2.
to upload on your social feeds a picture of this poor thing, because that thing has been to hell and back.
I don't think you've even seen it recently. Like, the buttons have just fallen out. Like, it just kept going. Like, the plastic on it just kept disappearing, like falling out. I still can press the buttons though. But here's what happened, Bally. Okay, so this thing, it's like my second. It's like how, remember when I played Smash Brothers, I was like, when I play as Lucina, it feels like, a part of my extended part of my body, when I play as Lucina. This thing is like a fifth limb for me. Like, I carry it around literally everywhere in the house. This is how I listen to podcasts.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that really annoying person on the bus who plays the music out loud on their phone. Like,
yes.
That is MBZ's life. Like, MBZ walks like this. It's like you said, a fifth limb, and it's just this blaring fifth limb that his poor family members have to deal with while he's walking around the house listening to podcasts, sometimes on 1.5 speed.
Mostly at 1.5 times speed. Yeah. But I modulate volume, so like if I walk somewhere and someone's hearing it, I'll just put it down a bit and stuff like that, and I pause it, and you can do the whole thing where you tap the top of it and it pauses it. Anyway, this UE Boom 2 that I think I've had for a decade now.
Wow.
So
I have the same one, and mine is in perfect nick. But
of course,
use it a fraction of the time you do.
Yeah, you don't abuse it the same way that I do mine. I think I've had it for more than a decade now, and it's like, I love it so much. It is the perfect size, portability, sound. It's the only way I listen to podcasts, unless I put my headphones in which case I do that. But I was going for a shower in the morning. And obviously I play it in the shower because I play podcasts constantly throughout my life. Otherwise do we do 80 hours a year?
It is meant to be waterproof.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not in the shower. I leave it outside on like the side, but I can still, I put the volume up really high, and I just kind of like drop it weirdly a little bit, and it like knocks it, and it turns off. I'm like, okay, that's annoying. I'll try and turn it back on, and then nothing happens. I'm like, what? Why is it not turning back on?
You
and then
it.
I know, but then it just turned on by itself and connected. And I'm like, what's happening here? And so I try and turn it off, and I can't turn it off. The button doesn't work to turn it off. I'm just pressing as hard as I can. Nothing's fucking. I'm like, why is it not turning off? So I'm like, okay, this is weird. Hopefully it goes away once the battery drains. So I leave it. I went to work that day. So I leave it here, and I just leave it on. I come back after work, and it's still on. The light is still on. I'm like, have you not drained your battery yet? And here's what's happening. It is just in this loop of, after 10 minutes, it automatically switches itself off, and then it just turns itself on again. So it's like turning off and then turning itself on. And I went into the app on my phone to like turn it off manually, and it still just keeps turning itself on. And like, I think it's just beyond repair now. Nothing is working. I can't like make it happen. The problem is that if I leave this thing on overnight in the room I'm in, it will make noise because there's that sound of turning on and turning off. So I literally had to put it next door under a blanket because it's so fucking loud. So I put it next door under a blanket so that in the night I don't hear it. And so today I went online onto Amazon and I bought a new one. Here's the problem. The UE Boom 3 is just not the fucking same. Like, I've done a lot of research as well of like what's the right size for me, because the size of the Boom 2 is perfect. It's such a portable, in my hand, I can pick it up easily with one hand.
It's like a large can.
Yes, it's nice. It's a thin enough size to where it fits in a lot of places. Like, it fits in the side pocket of my backpack. It fits in a car kind of cup holder.
I've done
that kind of level of size. And they just decided to make it fucking wider. And I'm like, I can't, like, it's really fucking annoying me. And I'm going to get this new one, but it's just not going to be the same, Bally. It's one of those things where sometimes you have that thing and you hold on to it. It's like me with regular headphones that I also can't find.
It's like us recording this podcast right now on Skype.
100%. And I think I am just like that. I'm just that type of person where if I lock into something and I like it, I won't change it. I am a creature of habit. I have cornflakes every fucking morning of my life, and I never change it.
I'm the same. I have Weetabix every single day.
Right, I'm just a creature of habit. I will do my habitual things, and I will just lock into them. And Headphones is like that. Fucking shaving is like that. I just keep buying the same fucking razor on my old thing that isn't supported anymore because all these other new ones are like flappy and weird. It's the same with so many things in my life. And this speaker, it was one of my favorite things in the world, and now it's died. And I have to live with the inferior product, and I can't buy the old version of the product, and it sucks. I hate it. I hate this thing.
Are you going to buy the new version, or are you going to keep looking for other types of speaker?
I've already ordered it. And here's the problem. I literally can't function in my life without a speaker. So like I signed up for a free week of Amazon Prime just to get the free delivery for tomorrow to have it because I've
not got time for research. I have to get the speaker tomorrow.
Honestly, like it is that bad. I will honestly lose my entire functioning personality, the way that I live my life. It is like a reflex to turn on a speaker and just start playing a podcast. And when I can't do that, it feels so wrong.
I'm the same, but with my headphones. It's important. You need to be ready to listen to podcasts. And we were just talking the other day with Ali T, our good friend, about the amount of time we spent listening to podcasts last year, and I still don't have the confidence to admit on the show what I listened to last year. I think you tweeted yours out, but it was bad.
Yeah. So
we like podcasts.
Anyway, I just wanted to say rest in peace to my speaker that has probably been around the entire length of this podcast, if I'm honest. I think I might have got it 2015, I want to say. But since then, it has never left my side every single day for the last almost a decade. So yeah, it's going to be replaced. I'll check in with how the new one stands up, but I don't have high hopes for its portability. I think the sound and stuff will be fine. I think connecting to my phone will be fine. It's just a bit too thick for me, It's just not the right... It's like I'm a little bit like Goldilocks with speakers. Like it was the perfect fucking porridge, and now this one is just not quite right.
Is the new one a smart speaker?
What do you mean by smart speaker?
I don't even know what a smart speaker is. I've just heard a couple of podcasts say, listen to us on your smart speaker. And I thought, what? I know what a smart TV is. Is a smart speaker just...
I think it might be one that connects to Wi-Fi and therefore can like stream Spotify on its own and stuff like that. Because the thing that shall not be named that begins with an A that's a woman's name, there's the Amazon one. That one. That one my parents have at home. And that's it's kind of a shitty speaker.
Oh,
but
we've got one,
Yeah, but you can talk to it and say, play this thing from Spotify or play this podcast.
That is a smart speaker.
I guess that's a smart speaker, is what they're talking about.
Even though she's stupid. But
Yes. Anyway, hello, Bally, how are you doing?
I'm good. We were just saying how we're recording on Friday the 9th of February, and this episode is coming out on Monday the 12th of... So it's Nintendo Direct season.
It is,
And if it's Nintendo Direct season, that means that we put out a show just before the Nintendo Direct, and then we end up waiting a fortnight until we talk about the Direct that has just happened.
Look, unless they announce Switch 2, I think we're going to have some cold takes here, We're going to have some ice cold takes that come delayed, but I don't think that they're going to talk about anything of that nature this week.
The rumor is... And you were telling me this, that it's going to be like a kind of third parties direct, which sounds like really low stakes. Just got to get the contracts fulfilled. And then the rumor is some sort of Switch 2 announcement in March. Yeah. So that's where
seems to be a lot of smoke around that. So fingers crossed, because I think that would be very exciting. And I think a lot sooner than a lot of people were expecting, potentially.
Do you vote trailer or tweet with image, and does the image have a name?
I think trailer with press release is what they'll do, similar to Switch 1. It will be a 3-minute trailer with press release that talks a little bit more about stuff, and we'll get a glimpse of the new Mario game, just like we had before with Odyssey, right?
God.
So I think that's a possibility there.
That'd be awesome, and then that leads on to probably a September-October launch date.
Yeah, with probably a June presentation, right?
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
where they actually say, here's the launch lineup, here's what the games are going to be, all that
Deep
sort of stuff.
dive on new Mario Kart, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so looking forward to that definitely being real 100%. So fingers crossed that that's the case. But yes, we're here today to talk about what we've been playing, video games and all that other stuff. Bally, you want to tell everyone what the show is going to be like today?
For the first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing, and the second segment, we've got some more listener emails.
Absolutely. Nice little cadence, I think, at the start of the year with those segments. I'm sure the news will start shaking things up soon. But keep that mailbox filled up. We'll get to it in the segment. But always need more for that stuff. So if you never sent it in, do get on it. But Bally, let's kick off with some video games that we've been playing. And I have been playing something new, something that has been a little bit anticipated here on the show. We got a little bit of a review copy for it, which is the expansion for Eastward Octopia, the farming expansion for Eastward, which was a real surprise when it got announced, I think, for a lot of people. Eastward's a game that came out 4 years ago now. It's been a little while.
2019?
It was 2020, I think. Something like that.
2021?
No, it was 21. It was 21. So
21.
It's 3 years.
It was 21.
3 years, which is interesting. They decided to do something completely different, which is to put out an expansion to the game that is basically kind of takes place in a different universe, but reimagines all the characters as people who come and live on this small rural town and do some farming and kind of like Animal Crossing type stuff and chores and all those sort of things. So I, despite having had it for a little while, I am not actually that deep into the game. I am only probably 3 hours so far. Part of that is because Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth came out, and I spent an entire weekend just playing Dondoko Island, which, if you've heard of that game, is basically an entire Animal Crossing game within Like a Dragon. And it took me like 15 hours to play just that. And it's interesting because there are a lot of similarities between them. And to some degree, because I did so much of that, I got a little bit, not burned out, but I was like, I can't go from one farming experience directly into another farming experience. I haven't had as much time to dip into this.
It was a very accidental kind of clash, wasn't it? Like, it just...
it was unexpected.
Not one I would have thought of.
Yeah, totally. So I think this thing's really cool so far. I've got some issues with it, but I think that they're things that probably will iron out as you get deeper into it. It basically kind of throws you in there and says, okay, off you go, just start doing stuff. And I don't think it really tells you enough about what you should be doing or why you should be doing it. Is there
any narrative, like why you're doing farm stuff?
There's there's story in the sense that you get to this place and it's just you guys. It's John and Sam, right? The main characters of Eastward, and they're hanging out. Sam is adorable as always. Love to see new Eastward stuff because you just get new animations of Sam doing fun things like eating like stuff in the morning. So you wake up.
Exactly the same renders and art style and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it just, as soon as I got back into it, it hit me with nostalgia, which is weird for a game that came out 3 years ago. But like the music of Eastward, the visuals of Eastward, like it's so good. Like it just reminded me how much I loved this world and all the stuff that went on with it. That stuff is great. Like the music kicking back in was a real joy. So you kind of arrive at this place, no one else is there, and then slowly people start arriving. So William from Eastward arrives with the two Daniels, the robot Daniel and the real Daniel, who were characters in the main game and had a whole kind of story kind of wrapped around them and what was going on, and some interesting stuff as a parallel to John and Sam. We talked a lot about that in our spoilercast stuff, but those characters show up and they're like, we're going to live here as well. So it's like, it's nice to take these characters and put them in a setting where there's literally no danger and the world isn't ending, and it's more of a chill vibe, and you can kind of hang out and chat with them and do all that sort of stuff. So they arrive and they start setting up shop. So they set up a shop where you can buy like wheat seeds or tomato seeds or any kind of vegetable, parsnips, carrots, daikon, and so you can go to them, you can buy stuff. You are also equipped with a hoe that you can use to make your vegetable patches ready to be planted. You have a watering can that's an infinite watering can, so it doesn't do the thing where you have to go and fill it up. It's just infinite, which is kind of nice. You've got a fishing rod, so you can go fishing, and you have an axe that you can use to chop down both trees and stone kind of rock formation, so that you can collect wood and stone as your main resources. And I would say that to begin with, it feels quite limited because you have a very small space. You've got the kind of farmland that you are inhabiting with your house, and so you can place stuff down there. There's the woods where you can chop things down and get some rocks. The main town square, which doesn't have much in it except for the few people who have arrived. And then to the left-hand side, there's a swamp. And in the swamp, there's like a weird flying pig. And I think that's eventually going to tie into farming stuff with animals. But the pig's just flying around the swamp. And you can pick up some materials there, like snails. And there's some other stuff, these kind of glowing green... I can't remember what they're called, but there's some kind of fruit of a sort, and you collect those things. And so to begin with, it's a lot of just collecting resources and not really knowing what to do, because I just don't think the game does a good job tutorializing anything. It's kind of like, what if Stardew Valley was just like, it just threw you in there and it didn't tell you that, you know, at the end of the day, you put things in the box and that gets sold. Like, they tell you that you can sell stuff to the shop, but you never know, like, should I be putting these resources into like a box at the end of the day? Should I be like shipping off my food? Like, there's nothing like that to say how do you actually make money. And so you have to just assume, like, I guess I just make food and make recipes and then I sell them to the shop. And then I just got to today, before we started recording, I got to a point where finally I knew what to do with my wood and with my stone. So to begin with, you give the wood and stone to somebody to start building something, and then they never talk about it for the next like few days, and then eventually you get a quest where you have to make someone tea. So you make them tea, and then you start this quest where there's a board, and the board is like, oh, we can start building things in the town, and the first thing you want to build is the train station, because it's kind of dilapidated. You want to build it back up. And so I go there and I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, let's spend 20 rock and 10 wood and let's build up the thing. And so I go there and then I go to sleep, come back the next day, I'm like, nothing's happened. And I realize I go up to where the train is and there's a box there, and I click on the box and it's like, you have to put the wood and the stone into this box. It just doesn't tell you. It's it's a bit weird, where it's just that it just lacks any tutorialization, which meant that like I was 6 or 7 days into playing it and I hadn't figured out that I could get recipes by opening a recipe book, going into a menu that says create recipe, and then all these kind of thought bubbles pop up, and you just press them and you start learning recipes. And I had like 25 recipes that I just hadn't popped yet. I was just playing, I was making the same fucking daikon soup, and I was like, how do I make any money in this game? Because all I can make
is... It's like like Farm Sim 101 is, you gotta have a strong tutorial. Like, that's how you kind of settle into things. Is there like so there's a real clock? How long is each day roughly? Or I
would say like 20 minutes. Okay. It's like a minute
indoors,
per second.
Is that a thing?
No, it doesn't. It pauses in menus. So when you pause to go into the menu, or when you're cooking, no time passes when you're cooking.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that like the experience onboarding, getting into it, it's a little rough, because they just don't really explain anything. And I think in a game like this, where it's so mechanically different from the base game, it would have done them well to just walk players through things a bit more obviously. Even if you are someone who knows the genre, they just do things a little bit differently with some of its systems, and they don't really tell you. So yeah, I think to begin with, it can be a little bit confusing, because you start a day and you're like, well, it's like 12 o'clock and I feel like I've done everything I need to do. Do I just go to bed early? Like, it just feels a little bit like you're lacking places to go or things to do to begin with.
Is it a hard genre to come back to after a game like Stardew Valley that is just hits it out the park on so many levels?
Maybe, but I do think Stardew starts out with a very slow ramp up. I think you just need to know how to do the ramp up, right? And I just don't think this game does the ramp up very well to start with. I'm enjoying it a lot, and it does have the, you know, I just was playing it before we started this, and it has the, you wake up in the morning, immediately you see your crops that are ready to go outside, and you make the mistake of taking the crops, and you're like, oh no, I've started the day, now I have to finish the day, right? Like, that is very much a Stardew problem, where if you don't shut it off right after you go to bed, you will just play another day. And I remember when I played Stardew for the first time, I would start playing at like 7 in the evening and forget to have dinner, and then I look at the clock and it's 3 a.m. and I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, I was at uni and I was like, what the fuck did I just do? I just don't know what happened to me. And it has that. I think it does have that. It does have that quality. Not as strong as Stardew Valley, of course, because that's like maybe one of the strongest loops in all of games in the history of the medium, maybe. But it still has that sense of, oh, I want to go and do that stuff. And because money is a little bit scarce to begin with, there is a sense of, okay, I've got to get all these things lined up so that I can start making food and cooking food. And, you know, it takes some nice things from the base game. So, like, the cooking mini game is still the same as in the original, which is not really a mini game. It's more like the most beautiful animation you've ever seen with the best cooking song of all time. Ooh. And you just, even though you've seen it 1,000 times, I still just watch it every single time. Just watching the pixelated broccoli fall into the pan and go do do do, and just like the music pot, it's just really nice. So yeah, the cooking is still fun and engaging, and it has this interesting stamina system, right? So you start off with like a bar at the bottom of the screen. It's a stamina bar, and what I realized was I would, you know, use my axe to chop down a bunch of trees and stone and stuff, and I got like my stamina all the way right to the bottom at the end of the day. And then I would go to sleep at the end of the day, and I'd wake up the next morning and the stamina bar would go bloop, and it would do a tiny little bit extra. And I'm like, oh no, do I only gain like a tiny bit of stamina after going to sleep? So what the game does is it encourages you to cook food that you can sell, damn. But then you also need to cook food to keep your stamina up. So if you're not managing it correctly, you could wake up on a day and have so little stamina that you can't really do any of the physical tasks unless you start eating food in order to top yourself up. So it leads to this interesting conundrum of like, okay, I don't want to do I want to get my stamina bar to maybe half before I go to bed, because before bed I can have dinner. And there's a distinction between going to bed and having dinner and going to bed, because if you have dinner and go to bed, you basically set up this little scene where you and Sam are sitting by a table in your little hut, and you Sweet. Choose what to eat. And if you eat at the dinner table, as opposed to just eating out in the overworld, you get an additional bonus stamina. So say you're eating a daikon soup, it gives you 30 stamina if you were to just eat it. But if you eat it at the dinner table at the end of the day, you get plus 15 on top of that. So it becomes 45 instead of 30. So it's benefiting you to wait until the end of the day to top up your stamina. And you can top it up if you want to throughout the day. At this point, I've made a lot of wheat and I've got a lot of flour through my mill. So there's a weird ghost character who stands there, and I don't really know what he does. He's like, I'll grind for you if you pay me 50 coins. And again, with the not really explaining things, I don't know what the fuck that means. Like, I'll grind for you? Does that mean you're gonna like operate this machine? But this machine takes like a couple of button presses for me to do it myself. So I just don't really understand what he's saying. He's like, I'm gonna do some tasks for you, but I'll pay you. But I don't know what I'm gonna get out of it. But yeah, because I have a lot of resources now, it's easy for me to make flour and then turn that flour into, you can do baguettes, naan bread. The recipes isn't really fun, actually, because there's loads of different types of food, and a lot of them are kind of Japanese inspired as well. So you can catch puffer fish in the fishing minigame, and you can use that to make fugu sushi, which is very fun.
And can you kill yourself?
I don't. That would be hilarious if there's like a 1% chance for you to just die. So far, no. Mainly, I have been selling my fugu sushi because it's quite valuable, so you actually get a lot of money for it. So it does have this. Eventually, you get into this nice loop, and I think I'm just kind of breaking into that now, which is, you know, going and fishing to get fish so I can cook sushi or I can have it in a different meal, and then each of these villagers, as they arrive, they will start having quests for you. So, like I said, someone wanted tea, so I had to go and make tea leaves, and then it's interesting because if you put the tea leaves into the flour mill, you can make matcha, and then you can use that matcha to make other stuff out of it. So there is a little bit of layering systems here, and the cookbook seems to have like different star tiers of recipe. So I've only unlocked 1-star and 2-star recipes so far, but I imagine it keeps going to like 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, right? And so the more recipes, the more ingredients you have, eventually it'll get more complex and you'll start making more recipes. And I imagine down the line, more characters will ask for different types of food, and so you're going to have to figure out how to get, which is a really nice loop, actually.
So is there quite a lot of depth, would you say, to like the number of characters, relationships? Like, can you get like girlfriends or boyfriends, or can you, like, compared to Stardew, does it have the same number of systems, or is it going for a kind of more narrow number of systems, but then really going for them, as it were, and really focusing on the animation and the cute scenes, like, you know, with Sam and the dinner table, you know?
I think it doesn't have like depth in that same way. I believe there's no relationship building here. It's just hanging out with kind of the characters from Eastward. But because it is tied to that game, I'm sure there's like lots of fun nods to it and things like that. Like, so Lee, the guy with the cigar from like the big city, he arrives and he's like, hey, I can drum up some support for you, but first make me shrimp dumplings. And so the game gives you a timer of like 5 days of like, within 5 days, we need to figure out how to make shrimp dumplings. So it involves going to one of the ponds to find where the shrimp are, involves making flour, so you have that ready. And
sounds
it involves...
like the cooking is kind of a main mechanic in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I would say it is kind of the core of the game because it's the main way you make money and it's the main thing that the purpose of making your crops is, because you make the crops in order to feed those systems. So like you have to buy wheat seed from William, you then take the wheat and plant it, you then harvest it the day after, you then put it into the mill to make flour, and finally use that flour to make a baguette or a naan bread or some kind of other bread item. And then you can also use the flour to combine with other recipes, and that recipe is either going to be something that you give to a townsperson to complete a quest, or you sell it, or you eat it yourself so that you can keep your stamina up to keep the loop going, essentially. And yeah, it feels like it's got kind of a light version of all these systems where there's wood and stone. Those are the things you're going to need to build up the town in terms of making new buildings. So you have to resource gather those every day to have enough so you can build up and make the town prosper and, fix...
But you don't think there's many more building resources beyond wood and stone?
It would surprise me if there are. I think what I can see is that there is like a snowy area to like the left of the screen that's like on a raised platform, and I imagine I'll unlock that eventually and that'll be a new biome that I can enter and do stuff there. But to begin with, it is just because it's so contained, there's just not as many things to be doing, because even when you go to the swamp has different looking trees, but you still get regular wood out of them.
And what's the main aim of the game? Is there a key narrative and points that you're following, or does it seem quite open-ended, and then does it have a clear ending, as it were? Because Stardew Valley, yes, you can play it infinitely, but a lot of people do the whole kind of, is it the 3 years thing, and there's kind of
Grandpa comes back and Grandpa says if your farm is good or not, which I don't think I actually ever did get to Grandpa, but I did. I think fixing the community center is really the end of the game for Stardew. If I was to give it a true end, which is like fix the community center and drive out Jojo Mart, essentially, is the idea. I think this is probably just going to be build up the town until all the characters get there, right? There's probably roll credits once you finish the town and all the characters are there. And there's probably...
I think it's like 15 hours I heard or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty short for this type of game.
It sounds like there's like some mysteries going on. So here's the other thing. I went to the swamp and there's a building in the swamp and it's like a techie kind of mechanical building. You go inside, you go down a ladder and there's like a weird computer, which is reminiscent of some stuff from Eastward, right? So really I wonder, dark stuff. I wonder if there's some weird deep mystery hidden underneath this town.
Jojo Mart.
Yeah, who knows? So I think that's going to play into the narrative, which is quite interesting. But yeah, so far it's quite light in terms of that stuff, and it's mainly, okay, Lee is coming to town in 5 days, let's make the food before he arrives. And then he arrives, and now he's saying, okay, this feels like where the game is really kicking off, because now I can start building stuff, and now more people are going to start entering the town and joining it. And I don't know, like, what other mechanics they'll bring with them. Will they bring other types of stores where I can buy other stuff? I haven't even got into the animal stuff yet, right? I bought a beehive, so that beehive every couple of days gives me a piece of honey. I'm sure there's a way for me to enhance that and buy more beehives. I just bought a chicken coop, so that chicken coop will start giving me eggs eventually, and I'll use those eggs to do different recipes. And I eventually probably get those weird cows that I saw on the GIFs and screenshots and trailers, as well as the pigs coming in. Like, feels like the layers are going to start being added. But I do think it's just a little bit of a rough beginning to get into it. Because I anticipate that by the time I finish it, I'll have really enjoyed it and like come out of the experience being like, this is great, it's fantastic. But I just think that learning it to begin with, getting on board and figuring out what you're supposed to be doing and prioritizing, I just don't think it does a good job of setting that stuff up. And so if you are looking to get into it, I might just look up online like what some tips of like how to get started with this DLC, because I just don't think they know how to tutorialize this stuff, which I think Eastwood suffered a little bit from that stuff as well. So it's a little tricky, but really I am really enjoying it. And I think like just the vibes alone, just being back with this world and the music and the art is just, it's really cozy and fun. And it's a perfect handheld in-bed game. So definitely definitely good if you enjoyed Eastward to any degree and you just want an excuse to return to that world. I definitely recommend it.
I mean, the world and the vibes and the characters were like the best things about that game. Probably.
Yeah, 100%.
So if it's replicating a lot of that's very cool.
Yeah, it carries it a long way, and at the end of the day, it's still a strong loop. Like the Stardew loop is still extremely accessible and just engaging. So I did again. I was looking at the clock today. I was like right before recording. I was like, oh, I need to put it down because we have to start recording. So it does get its hooks in you eventually. So it's Octopia, the Eastward DLC. Check it out.
Well, from one life sim game to a death sim game? I don't know.
Oh boy, okay.
I don't even know how to describe it. I've been playing Cult of the Lamb. So it came out on all the platforms back in 2021, 2022? 2022. I think it was 22.
I think it was 22, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when the game came out, I remember hearing so many good things. But the one thing that put me off with this game was like the world and the style and just how dark and weird it is. I really am not a big fan of Halloween. And this game oozes like Halloween and darkness and weird. It's cute as well as horror as well as dark. And I just thought, I'm not so sure. But this game was on sale. I was monitoring a few indie games I was interested in on sale, and this one came up, and it was cheapest on PlayStation 5, so I picked it up on there. And the more I've played this game, the more I've realized for what this game's trying to do, there's not really any other theme I can think of that would actually fit what the game is trying to do. And it would be very hard to think of a different theme, a different type of world that this game could be doing. Because ultimately, this game is Hades crossed with Stardew Valley. And I think the game generally leans more towards the Stardew Valley. And when I say Stardew Valley, it's like Stardew Valley, but very merged with The Sims. There's a lot of management of the characters themselves, not just farming and mining and that kind of thing. It's like a more management sim overall, rather than purely a farm, as it were. Although farming is part of it.
Yeah, which I'm struggling to think, like, what kind of management-y style games have you ever played before?
Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon, a bit of...
but outside the farming genre, right?
Oh, right, yeah, no. I mean, SimCity, Animal Crossing. I played like a lot of like SeaWorld Tycoon, which is based off Zoo Tycoon back in the day. Yeah. I played some Zoo Tycoon as well. What else have I played? Yeah, just kind of the theme park tycoon-y kind of games I played back in the day, back on PC, when I was used to once upon a time be a bit of a PC gamer, which was a weird time. So yeah, not a ton, to be honest, not a ton. And yeah, like I said, it leans more into the simmy side of things than the Hades side of things. And what I mean by that is there's like 4 dungeons and then like a final thing, I believe. And I've done 3 out of the 4 dungeons. And even if you were the most skilled dungeon crawling roguelike player from like a game like Hades or some similar game like Dead Cells or something, you cannot beat this game in one run. Like it segments stuff quite a lot. Every dungeon you have to beat 4 times to get to the final boss. So 4 times 4 is 16. So you're looking at, if your skill was through the roof, you are doing 16 runs through dungeons to beat this game. And I think that emphasizes just how much the game relies on the sim element, because it's forcing you to come back to your cult and make your cult stronger. So I've not explained how it works, but you play as a lamb who leads a cult. It is Cult of the Lamb. So you gain followers through a number of ways, and the aim of the game is to make your followers like you more. And the more followers you have that like you more, the more it will raise your faith. And the more that you raise, so you do daily sermons. So say I've got 8 followers and they're all level 1, and I do a daily sermon, my faith will build by 8 points. That bar builds up, and every time the bar completes, you go to a skill tree. And that skill tree improves the skills of the lamb for when they are dungeon crawling. That is the key skill tree of the game. That's one of multiple skill trees in this game. It is an incredibly dense game when it comes to systems. I've not played many, if any, 4X games because I don't own like a gaming PC. Well, I used to apparently when I played Tycoon games. But this game feels like it's systems on top of systems on top of systems more than anything I've ever played. I think this game, the way its systems blend together, is actually even more impressive than a game like Stardew Valley. Like it is doing so much, so impressively well. So you are making your cult leader, the lamb, stronger. But in order for your cult members to be happy, succeed, they need fed. They need beds. They need these things built. They need to be able to pray. They need to do all these things that you have to invest in basically the farm side of things to look after them. So you can ask them to worship like a little shrine in the middle of your cult. And that shrine builds up a bar. And this bar is the second most important bar of the game. This bar leads to a skill tree. And that skill tree unlocks buildings. So you've got the buildings that help your cult members, and then the more you help the cult members, they help you. And you've got the second skill tree, as it were. So does that all make sense? I mean,
yeah, I think so. I think it's I don't know how much like happiness management there is in this game, because that's one of those things that I always get off put by in things like The Sims or any of these type of games where you have followers, or you have like these guys who are wandering around doing tasks. Like a lot of city builders have this stuff where it's like your people will not be happy unless they are well housed and fed and the resources are coming in. And I can never get into the city building genre generally, because I get overwhelmed and I get annoyed by it, and I'm like, this is frustrating me more than it's fun. So to what degree do you have to do that micromanaging level of your cult to make sure everyone is happy and their needs are met and all that sort of stuff?
I think the game's incredibly impressively balanced, where you got 3 bars you need to keep satisfied. You've got their faith, so that's the most important one. That's like they believe in you. If they don't believe in you...
It's the core of any cult. They don't need anything else. Water, food, who cares? As long as they have faith, that's the way you keep people under control.
I mean, that's the most important one. The other one is food, and the other one is like cleanliness, hygiene. Those are the 3. Okay. So the faith, if the faith drops, that's when they can potentially rebel. And one cult member can start rebelling, and if you don't do something to manage that, they might convince other cult members that they should team up and leave your cult. And if their ideas spread to, let's say, half the cult can leave at once. I've not had this happen yet, but as my cult has grown, I think I'm up at like 18, 19 cult members, but cult members constantly die, members constantly come in, so the number keeps varying. I was as low as, I started with 0, and it's been as high as like 20, I believe.
Okay.
But when that cult is large, it does feel harder to manage. But equally, if you can manage it successfully, like I said, if you do the daily sermons, you'll build up way more points, way better.
Right.
So if the faith drops and you've got a rebel, you either have to imprison them and convince them to convert and stay in your cult, or you kill them. And like, those are more or less your 2 options. I had a rebel earlier today. I imprisoned them in the corner of the cult. And then it took me like 3-4 days to like go up to them every day and talk to them. And you can say like, come back to my cult, come back to my cult. And then eventually it'll be like, okay, so-and-so Bob, he's up for rejoining into the cult, and you release him out of the prison. If you get like a mass, rebellion, you have to have a really big prison, or you need to do a lot of killing. And like, I actually just unlocked the ability to murder.
Oh my god!
So this is the ability to literally walk up to a cult member and just murder them on the spot, which
Jesus.
you have to unlock.
How does the animation work for that? Do you just pull out a knife and just stab them, or what goes on?
I've not done it yet. I might have to. I'm not telling my cult members whether I will or not. I'm just hanging it over them. But that's one thing you can unlock, which is called like a doctrine. So
right.
God, this is where the systems get complicated. So
yeah.
When you do certain things in dungeons, or you level up certain cult members and level up their faith. Because like I said, they start level 1 and then you can level up to 2. And when you do a daily sermon and level 2, they'll give you 2 points instead of 1. Like, it's good to level them up.
Yeah.
Occasionally they give you like these stone slabs, and you need 3 stone slabs to make 1 whole stone slab, but like a heart piece. You can then go to your church and you can pick a doctrine. And there's like 5 areas of the doctrine, like within doctrine, that you can pick between. One is like labor, one is like eating, one is law and order, one of them is like the afterlife, and you just pick like, what do you want to improve in your cult. So one of mine was like, believes in earthly belongings, and then all of a sudden I can now basically walk up to any cult member, shake them down, and they give me some money, and like I can do that daily.
Sounds a bit like the ordinances in Animal Crossing, where you can be like, I want the town ordinance where all the flowers don't disappear.
Oh, right, yeah, it's a bit like that, but a bit darker.
Yeah.
So this one, I was just like, I had that rebel guy earlier today. I think I'm going to invest in some law and order. And that's where I had the option. And you get 2 options. You can pick like I'd say it's always a bit of a vanilla option or a fruity option. And the fruity option is always a bit more violent and takes more managing. But if you succeed in the fruity option, it's probably the better, stronger option for beating the game. Right. So the fruity option I had was murder. So you have the ability to just murder cult members on the spot. And it says like, warning, try not to do this to other cult members in front of other cult members. And then it said something like, try doing it at night. And it's like, oh my God, that's a great idea. I can just murder them at night, and then I don't have to
no one will see.
Manage this. So yeah, that's one thing that you can pick between. I think the other option I had when I did that, I can't remember. It was something a lot more vanilla and vague. Okay. I went fruity that time. But
so you've mentioned that you had to wait a few days to talk to this guy in order to convince him or whatever.
I talked to him once each day.
Right. So tell me about like the calendar system. How does it work? Like, do you have to go out on a run in order to progress time, or is it a system of every day will just pass as long as you just spend time in the cult, and there's a night-day cycle and that sort of stuff?
There's a day-night cycle. Night is like 1/8 of the length of day, and you don't have to sleep. Your cult members do, and time always passes. I'm convinced time even passes when you're in menus. Like, it is a ruthless game for that. And that's one of the cool things about the game is time is passing when you're in these dungeons. Now, dungeon run takes, I would argue, between 5 and 15 minutes max. Like, these are really short dungeons. They are it's one thing that's very different to Hades. These are very simplistic dungeons that you've got a dodge roll, you've got a regular attack, you've got a heavy attack, and you've got a range move. You're not given a ton of options weapon wise. I'd say in Hades you get like you choose your weapon at the start, and then there's variations on that. I feel like you don't get quite enough weapon choices throughout the run. So if you've got a weapon you don't like, only a handful of times I've been able to swap that weapon.
Well, it sounds like from what you're saying of how short the runs are, as well as from what everyone else talked about, because when people talked about this game on podcasts, I actually had no idea what the roguelike element was, because all people talked about was the cult aspect.
Right.
And it feels like that is like 70% of the game as opposed to the 30% that's a roguelike. And it feels like the roguelike stuff is almost tacked on to be like, we need to give people a bit of a break so they can do some action while, in order to break away from the cult stuff for a while.
You have to have it is first and foremost a cult management game. You are managing your cult to make your character stronger to take on the dungeons. The dungeons are still very fun, the enemies are good, but the cult and the animations and some of the dark crap you can pull off is kind of where the game is at. I get that. It is, in terms of feel and stuff, it's very rudimentary compared to Hades, but it's still really cool. Like, I think that, like I said, the time always passes. So there was one time I came back and there were 2 dead cult members just died of old age, like right in the middle of the cult, and they were rotting, and people were standing around them throwing up because they were looking at these dead bodies. And it's like, wow, shit, I need to get on top of this. And like, I think that's where the game's at its strongest. So there's definitely someone has thought at some point, we need reasons for them to be away from the cult in order for things to evolve and naturally change within the cult, so that you then have to come back and manage it. I think that's definitely what the game's going for. And like I said, you have to beat each dungeon like 4 times to reach the boss of that dungeon. So like it's forcing you to go on a lot of dungeon runs. And sometimes like cult members will come up to you and say, hey, can you go through that older dungeon? I need you to go and get 10 mushrooms from that old dungeon. It's like, okay. And if you refuse quests, you can lose a lot of faith quite quickly. But these meters you're managing between hygiene, picking up fertilizer, which is their poo, and then like managing their faith, you can boost all of those very quickly. It's very quick to make lots of food. It's very quick to just pick up all the poop in the cult. It's very quick to do a daily sermon that just boosts everyone's faith immediately on the spot. So like all these things to manage are very quick to solve, and there's never been a situation where, now maybe I'm quite good at this game, I don't know, but there's never been a situation yet, and I am in the final quarter of the game, so maybe it steps up now, but there's never been a situation where it's all just fallen to pieces. And I have heard it is possible for it to fall to pieces, and you essentially, half your cult leaves and you have to build up again slowly. That's ultimately what will happen, is lots of cult members will either die or leave, and then you just build them up slowly. It's hard to maybe manage a large cult for long periods of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. It does. It feels like, how challenging is that combat stuff? Does it ever get to a point where you are struggling against it, or does it very much feel like every time I enter, I'm probably just going to win?
At the start of the game, I won every time for like the first 6, 7, 8 runs, and then after that, I was like, wow, I'm getting my ass kicked. Like, it kind of. And that depends on drops. There are what's called tarot cards, and the tarot cards are like, this adds a heart, this makes enemies poisoned when you attack them, and you can go through the dungeon picking up tarot cards. I picked up an ability that grants me an immediate 4 tarot cards at the start of the run, but then I can no longer pick up any more tarot cards during the run. It's like a trade-off, because every time you beat one of the main dungeons, you unlock an ability that's like one of those kind of will help you on the run. For example, I unlocked the ability to just hold down R2 at any time, and it'll warp me straight back to the middle of my cult, because each boss is like this kind of demonic kind of god, and the 4 demonic gods all interrupt your runs often, and they all say, you think you can get me? Well, I'm gonna starve half of your cult right now. And you'll just see your 4 cult members just appear in front of this demonic god, and they suddenly go to starving, and then they warp back to your cult, and you're like, do I continue with this run and feed them when I get home, or do I warp out of the dungeon right now and feed them? And it's like the game is playing with you in that way. Everything I've said, I think, sounds very overwhelming, but it is. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, it feels like there's a lot of depth to this game. There's a lot of stuff going on. Have you been enjoying yourself while doing that?
It is one of the strongest loops I've ever played in a game, like since Stardew Valley. It is that good. Like, days are very fast. You don't have to sleep. You always have things to do with the materials, and there's even like locations you can visit that are aside to the cult and the dungeons. And I'll admit those areas are pretty boring, and from what I understand, like the stuff you unlock from them isn't massively helpful. But yeah, I do think it is manageable. I don't think it's the hardest game. I think for someone like me who's got pretty average roguelike experience and pretty average management experience, I think it's combining those two well, and I'm pretty good at both for this game. I think it worked. I've not had to change the difficulty, and it's manageable, but it's dark, it's weird, but I am addicted, and I now love the art style. I love the characters. I'm enjoying. I think it's one of those games where, while things are going good, the game will throw, but do you want to try murdering? Do you want to try sacrificing? Do you want to? So you can unlock rituals, and rituals you use bones from enemies you defeat in the dungeons to do the rituals. So I've got like 6 rituals. One of them is a feast. So I pay the bones and my whole cult eat, and it boosts their faith. So it boosts them eating and it boosts their faith all in the one. It's like a very wholesome, nice ritual. Another ritual I have is sacrifice. All my cult come together and a Cthulhu-like tentacle just appears from the bottom of the screen and takes a cult member away to die forever. And it's like, oh, well, that's nice. And I don't have to worry about burying that cult member. That's kind of like that's kind of what this game is going for. One of my rituals, I can bring back a cult member from the dead. So they're literally buried in my cult, and so you can build like crypts and bury them in the ground. And at certain points I'm like, crap, I need to build loads. Like, is my cult going to be taken over by crypts because there's just so many bodies piling up? Like I think my cult is at the moment 20 people, and I think I have 20 bodies on my cult.
How big is the space that you have to work with in terms of like area size?
It works. It fits. I think that I will play this game to get to the final boss and beat the final boss, and I will probably be done with the game. I think there's probably a lot of people who want to keep going and just enjoy the management thing.
Yeah, I didn't hear that much of that, though. It sounds like the ending of this game is pretty definitive.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I think a lot of people just beat it and then move on. It doesn't. I never really heard many people just continue to play it like you would one of these games.
Right.
And that was an interesting thing, because like that's when I look from a kind of publishing perspective at games, having a long tail of stuff that people can repeatedly go back to is always a benefit. And it was interesting looking at Cult of the Lamb, because I was like, oh, this doesn't actually follow that model that a lot of publishers kind of want, which is like endless content, continuing to do stuff again and again.
I mean, I think I'd be more inclined to start the whole game again and then just be as murderous as possible or something like that. You know, like play the game in a very different way, because those doctrines that you're building up from the slabs, the stone slabs, are randomized to some extent. So you're always going to get different doctrines on every playthrough, and they can have quite large impacts on like the game and how it goes. But yeah, I it's one of those things where when I know I'm about to face the boss for that dungeon, like the final boss of that dungeon, there's like a demonic circle I can go to, and I can just change one of my cult members into a demon, and that demon is now going to help me on that run. Like, and you can look through all your cult members and what they will become as demons, and some of them provide an extra physical attack, some of them do like another ranged attack, some of them will always hunt hearts while you're fighting, they'll always bring you back hearts. There are things you can do that directly impact your character that make the runs easier. So that's where I think the management trumps the roguelike nature of it. The game is admitting, hey, the harder you work on your cult, the better the run you will have. One of the abilities I just got is when I die in a dungeon, it'll say, would you like to sacrifice a cult member on the spot and we can give you another life in this dungeon run? Like, that's how you gain another run on the spot. Not another run on the spot, like another life on the spot, as it were.
Right.
And it's like, well, you've got to have a lot of cult members to get in there. And then even to get into the final dungeon, I think you need 14 cult members or something. So like the game forces you to do all these things. So yeah, it's a hell of a lot of systems. It
sounds like they all come together really well. Like, it sounds like they're all really well built to synergize with each other, so that everything you're doing is feeding into everything else.
Everything is feeding into everything else, because the main things you're getting by going on quests are cult members, money, and bones. Bones are what you use to do rituals. Cult members are what you use to do everything. And equally, money is what you use to do more or less everything, especially building things. So like that's the fundamental mechanic. And like all good management sims, it layers things on very gradually, very slowly. And I couldn't be much happier with this game. I've had a couple of crashes on PS5, which have been a bit annoying, because I think the game only saves when you come back to your cult. And it won't save again until you leave your cult. So going in and out of buildings, doing that kind of thing can make the game hang. It's like, oh, right, well, that's a crash. So I would recommend saving frequently while you're at your cult, but then going in and out of dungeons, it'll save automatically, stuff like that. But I don't know how well it runs on Switch. I heard a few people say the game was crashing a lot when it came out. I don't know which console that was on, but like here we are like 2 years down the line, and on PS5 it's still crashing occasionally, but it's an absolutely phenomenal game. I must admit the theming at times does make me feel uneasy. It's very like, oh, okay. And like I went back and listened to some podcasts, like people talking about it. I remember Greg Miller saying like, yeah, so I just named my first cult member Jen after my wife, and then she died. I just had to bury her like in the top left of the screen. It's just
were you doing any naming of your cult members, or do you just let it randomly assign the names? How do you? I let
it randomly assign, and that's not just because I'm Vanilla Bally, but that's because I've been through 45 cult members already. Arguably,
okay.
Like it's a lot of names to try and think of.
I don't know if you remember this, but when the game launched, I still think it still has this feature for streamers. It would automatically name cult members after members of the stream. So people who are viewers watching it, you would automatically get assigned a name, which is a really smart feature, very cool, and I think led to a lot of people streaming it because of that actual kind of integration there, which was super smart.
It's really cool. Are you aware of like some sort of DLC called something sin related for?
Yes, that was a recent update basically. They put it out like this year, I want to say, or end of last year. It's very, very recent because they're like, we're going to add sex to the game, and that's what they did.
So I now have sin in my game, and as far as I can tell, it's all decorative. It doesn't actually impact the mechanics of the game itself, as it were, but it becomes so your doctrine meter, as it were, has like if it's a 5-point star, and then sin is a 6th point on that star, and so one ritual I just got that is sin related is like a naked dance, and then I vote on which cult member danced naked the best, and then they get more sinful, and then I use that sin point to basically make my shrine look pretty. That's basically what it does. But I can like set up a bar, I can set up like a tent where they have sex, I can like set up these things that create more sin and use those sin points for like decorative things.
Interesting. So it looks like there's a couple of paid DLC packs. So the Sinful pack has like extra cosmetics and stuff like that, I want to say, but it seems like Sins of the Flesh was like the name of the update, and I guess the update is free, but you can also pay for like cosmetic things if you want them.
Because I was like harvesting grapes and hops, and I'm like, I see where we're going with. I'm seeing where we're going with it. Like automating all the stuff on your cult is very satisfying. Like I've got it almost all automated, which just is
nice.
Just building those engines. It feels very worker placement, very board gamey in that way, where you're putting cult members like, you're gonna just chop wood today, you're gonna just get stone, you're gonna work on the farm, and you're just gonna worship me all day, and like that's how it works. And it's like, here we go. It's hilarious, and it's hilarious to be able to come on a podcast and say, yeah, I just murdered my cult, hey, I just sacrificed it, hey, I just did this thing, and then they all threw up when they saw that body, and it's
oh my god,
it's wild. Like this way, the way that systems interact is very cool and satisfying in a way that kind of where you've been very satisfied in the past, MBZ, with a game like Breath of the Wild, where it's like, and then I melted the ice with this fire rod by accident. There's not in a physics way, but in a systems way. There's
in
stuff
a social
like
way,
in a social way, exactly. Like that's where I think this game is really, really smart, and really, it's very tongue-in-cheek, it's very dark, but as long as you're prepared for that, it's an incredible game. I cannot speak highly enough about it.
I think that's kind of riffing on the Sims stuff as well. I remember watching the Giant Bomb feature on the Sims, and like Abby's quest to kill people by having the electronics interact with the water so that they would electrocute themselves and die. It's cool that it's pulling from that and drawing on it, and I mean it's a game I would like to get to eventually. It sounds like a very good handheld game personally, so I would definitely want to pick it up either on Switch or on Steam Deck. But yeah, it sounds very, very appealing. So hopefully I'll get some time to get around to it eventually. Cool. But it's always fun, I think, when you bring a game to the show that I've not played.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that often. But,
so
I think I'm 13 hours in, and I've got one more dungeon to do, and like I said, I think there's a final boss after that. So Unless this final dungeon completely kicks my ass, I reckon I've got 3-4 more hours max. We'll see.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, it sounds great. Definitely. I'll get to it at some point. But my bedtime hours have been spent just chipping away at some small stuff. So I finished a little game, Bally, called Hoa. Hoa is it's a platformer, I guess. It's a you play as this little guy who's I say somewhere between like a fairy and a mushroom man or like a Pikmin. I don't really know what they are, if I'm honest. I wouldn't call them a mushroom man, but it's very kind of outdoorsy.
An outdoorsy man.
An outdoorsy. It's just a little like guy who's just running around, like has a, I don't know, they're wearing like a poncho.
I think he looks like an artistic gnome.
Yeah, I guess a gnome could be a good word for it. I don't really know what I would describe them as, but they're tiny, right? They're the size of like a bug. And you are very small in this world, and it's basically, I would call it like a linear Metroidvania platformer. And it feels, I would say it feels quite old in its design. And it's quite straightforward and very simple. It feels like an early indie game in the sense that it's not really doing anything that interesting. It's just kind of being like, you can jump and you'll eventually get a double jump and you'll get the ability to push some blocks, you know, like extremely basic, not super inventive, but just like a nice look to it, kind of charming. And so you're going through this kind of outdoorsy world where you're small, so you're jumping on these leaves, and the leaves are giant, right? So it's a bit like It Takes Two, or like any game where, like Toy Story, right, where you're a small person in a big world. But you're going from left to right, kind of getting through these spaces, and there is a map. So you get to a section, essentially, and you'll see the map, and it'll be like, here's a couple of stars, and here's some locations of some butterflies. And the idea is in each section, there's like one big character, like a giant robot guy or like a giant person who's covered in grass or foliage, and they're like, in order to function you have to go and do the two things, and then I will revive myself and I'll give you the next ability, and then you move on to the next section. So it feels like you're getting into these areas, you're locked into this kind of mini map for a while, you platform your way to get the golden butterflies and all this other stuff, and then you come back to the center and the person gives you your next ability and they move you to the next thing. It feels quite prescriptive, I would say. It feels like pretty basic, and it's one of those games that I saw was 2 hours long and was like, I just need something. Oftentimes when I go to bed, I want to play something that I can have a podcast on in the background, and I don't have to pay attention to a story or dialogue. I can just use my fingers to move some guy around and that's why platformers are great, because oftentimes they have no story, or at least the story is not interesting enough for me to care about it. It was definitely the case here, because there is dialogue, but I don't think I read any of it. And so I can just listen to a podcast half an hour before bed and play this. And I think it's 2 hours long. It took me 4 nights because I was playing half an hour every single night, right? But it's a really nice wind down type of thing where, just jump in a bit, like not really thinking about it too much. You get these abilities where you will jump, but then you can do like a ground pound, and so on some of the bouncy leaves, then you get a bit more height. At the end of the game, it gets a little more puzzly, where you're trying to turn these switches on and you're trying to figure out, like, going through some portal stuff. Like, it introduces some fun mechanics, but all of them are, I would say, prescriptive, like the type of thing you've seen in 100 different games before. Nothing too special. I can't remember when this game came out. I do remember like seeing trailers for it and looking at it and being like, oh, it's really pretty. And I think it comes from that era of indie games where it's trying to be very pretty with a unique art style, but ultimately mechanically, it just is the same as a lot of stuff, and it's not doing anything too special. So it's totally fine as a distraction. It's fine as a thing to just play if you are looking for something to, like me, turn your brain off for and listen to a podcast before you go to sleep as you're kind of drifting away. And yeah, I just like having that to go to, because oftentimes, even if I'm on the train, I've been playing Lufia 2 for like 2 years now on my Ambonic on the train. I'm about halfway through Lufia. It's really good. It's a great game. But
it's only played on London tubes.
Yeah, okay. It's the only time I've
played
it
for
on
2
the tube.
years.
I think so, yeah,
Jesus.
at this point. I'm about halfway through Lufia 2, but
Is
it's
it
consistent.
good?
I'll eventually talk about it on the show. I don't want to spoil my thoughts.
Okay, we'll check in 2 years' time.
So far, it's up there as like one of the best Super Nintendo RPGs. I will say,
damn,
it's a hidden gem for sure. But there are times in Lufia where I'm like, I don't want to figure out a dungeon puzzle. It's too much of my brain, and there's a dialogue thing happening, but I'm listening to Jeff Gerstmann as I'm also doing it, so don't want to split my attention. So oftentimes after work, if I'm coming back, I'll just fucking play Tetris on the But I've played, you will be shocked, the amount of Tetris I have played in the last couple of years.
This is the first time you've told me you've played much Tetris. But
I think I've mentioned it before. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it. Okay. But like, it is my go-to game on the Ambinic of like, I just need something to do with my fingers while I, pass time on the tube.
Do you want my controversial opinion?
Sure. What is your controversial opinion?
I prefer Puyo Puyo to Tetris.
Oh wow! I've not played enough Puyo Puyo to know whether I do or not.
I've just played a bit of the demo, but
yeah. Anyway, I that is to say that like I'm always looking for a game of that type where it's just pure mechanics and I don't have to think about anything else.
My equivalent is Forza.
Yes, exactly. It's mechanics. A great example. Yeah, pure mechanics.
They didn't even put music in that game. I don't even have to listen to it.
Yes, tease for an upcoming episode. I'm currently playing GBA Classic Donkey Kong King of Swing.
Oh my god!
You remember this is the one where Donkey Kong
shoulder
swings.
Buttons.
Yeah, shoulder button swings on these little pegs. That's my current go-to before bed. Not thinking about anything.
Who's that
game
developed by?
I don't know, but it will come up on the show in the future. I will talk about it eventually. But that is my current before bed turn my brain off game. But I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah, we're talking about Hoa. Anyway, Hoa. It's like fine. It is probably the most 5 out of 10 game I've played in a while, but that's okay. Sometimes you need to do that. So, do I recommend it? No, not really. But if you want to tick a game off of a list like I often do, it's good for that. So it looks nice. I will say it does look very lovely, and it has kind of a nice little soundtrack to it, like some nice music. So yeah, check it out if you want.
Sweet.
Not a strong recommendation, but check it out if you want. Bally, you feel like you've been going hard here, playing loads of Cult of the Lamb.
I've been going ham. I don't know I'm just on I've got my video game mojo at the moment.
Yeah, you really do.
I finished up Sea of Stars. Damn, that's a good game. It is a fantastic game. It was one of those games where you said, like, Bally, I think, the start is slow. I think it's got a little bit of a flabby middle, but the ending is really good. And I'll be honest, I was really enjoying the flabby middle. Okay. So my hopes for the ending were quite high, and it far exceeded them. The bits you said were going to be dull were even more fun, and the bits you said were going to be great were as great as you said. Like it's a phenomenal, such an impressive game. I could not be happier with this game. I think, like we've said before, if there was like anything to ding it on, it'd be like some of the writing, and as you said, maybe the lead protagonists are pretty vanilla, but I'd argue like quite a lot of protagonists are often vanilla. But I was blown away by this game. It like the most perfect love letter to Chrono Trigger you could ever hope for. Like, it's that good. And I was just messaging you about the podcast that the main lead director for the game was on, and he was saying how he loved the mechanic of battles like Chrono Trigger where there's no new screen. The enemies are on the screen, which this game does. And he wanted to combine that mechanic with the timed button presses of the Paper Mario series. And
I think it's Super Mario RPG specifically, right, that he was talking about?
Mario RPG.
Yes, yeah.
Well, Mario RPG, Paper Mario, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to his knowledge, there is no existing RPG, JRPG that combines the two until they made Sea of Stars. So I think it's just so cool the way that like those are two things from RPGs I've played that I really liked. Like I loved like not having to load into a separate screen for battles, and I love the action timed combat. Like I think that stuff is phenomenal. And yeah, I really I went down a nerd hole once I beat this game about all the ways that it ties into the Messenger, which I think is incredible. And I maybe want to mention a couple of those. We can maybe go into spoilers, but yeah, I don't know what else to say that I haven't already said about this game. I want to talk about a couple of spoiler points. So yeah, shall we put up those barriers, MBZ?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we'll put a timestamp here. If you want to jump ahead to the emails, you can do that. If not, stick around and yeah, we can chat a little bit of spoilers on Sea of Stars. But yeah, I think the end of this game is quite cool. I think the moment for me was when it transitions into the eponymous Sea of Stars, and it suddenly does that 3D thing where you go behind the ship, and I'm like, wow, this is super cool. It's very impressive. And then you get to basically the world of ruin, essentially, like the Final Fantasy VI kind of dark world in some ways, and there's like another 10 hours of game to go, basically. And it's basically an entire new overworld, entire new map.
Yeah, but this alternate world has its own politics and dynamics, and I love like the 3 bird people things in the tower. Do you remember them?
Oh yes, yeah, I remember
like
them,
that stuff is awesome. I love like the clouds in the sky and the sunken moon, and like you're bringing the sun out and the moon up from like the bottom of the sea, and there's like that Cthulhu style boss at the bottom of the sea. Like, it's really cool. I think one of my favorite aspects of the whole game is actually the character Sarai, or Captain Cliche, as they're called in like the main game. And what I love about Sarai is they're constantly hinting at aspects that link to the world. So when you first meet Sarai, they're warping around in these kind
of green portals.
The green portals. And you think, these green portals don't look like they fit in this world in the slightest. And they talk about the Sea of Stars, but I wouldn't say they talk about other worlds until maybe a little later in the game, or maybe when they talk about other worlds, there's definitely zero implication you're ever going to go to those other worlds, as it were. And I think the way that the game gradually reveals the Sea of Stars and how to get there, and that you're trying to defeat evil across worlds rather than just your world in true JRPG fashion, is gradually told very well. And I think they do that well through Sarai, where you get the very obvious reveal that they're Captain Cliche, and that's cool. What of it? But the better moment is when Sarai reveals 2 things: that the cyber world that you go to is their world, on top of the fact that they brought you here to, mend the world, on top of the fact that Sarai is actually a cyborg, and that
pulls down the mask and reveals the robot
mask
face.
And it's like, damn, that's like this is layers of reveals that link to this character and the world, and like that, in my view, is peak traditional JRPG storytelling. Like, that is,
totally,
because it links to the world, it links to the character. And I think a game like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, they all have characters that represent worlds and towns and cities from these games, and they take their experience of some sort of bloodshed or a war, or some evil villain has done something in one town and they have lost loved ones in that one town, and now they are on your fellowship, your crew, to avenge their loved ones. That kind of dynamic, I think, works so well with these kinds of games, and Sea of Stars just knows exactly that that's what fans want and delivers on. I think that the character Best, which is like a reference to Altered Beast, is an incredibly cool little reference. Did you get that one, MBZ?
No, I don't think.
So I looked up like all the references, and Best is like meant to be short for Beast, and Beast is a reference to Altered Beast. And so when Best uses all of its strange abilities, all these beasts are like from the game Altered Beast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, I've watched Altered Beast. Dan and Vinny over at Giant Bomb played through it. It is a fucking dog shit game. It is like, holy shit! If you want to see a garbage ass game, Altered Beast sucks ass. It's so bad. But yeah, I didn't realize that some of it's because they have a lot of moves, that character, and I didn't use them a huge amount because there's like very late game party edition, right, to the party. So yeah, it's I didn't really pick up on that stuff, but that's very cool.
And so you've got the older blue and red dude, Solstice Warriors. I've forgotten their names already.
Oh yeah, I can't remember.
But the blue dude, he becomes the main villain in The Messenger, which I just think
I had no idea about that. That's very
incredible,
cool.
And I'm just a sucker for when worlds and games come together like that, especially in like different genres as well. Like I think
it's interesting because like I really tried with The Messenger to read stuff, but as you know, I just cannot give a shit about story when it's a 2D platformer or a Metroidvania. Like I got so lost with it, and I was like, I don't care.
But I think playing The Messenger in a pre-Sea of Stars world is maybe a little different as well. Like
exactly. So I think that when you play The Messenger, which I saw that you bought it recently,
yes,
you will probably... You'll probably get a lot more out of it as a result of now having played. So you're kind of doing it in reverse, but in a way it works better because there's already an investment there that I don't think would have existed if you started with The Messenger.
Yeah,
you know?
No, totally. Another thing I really like about this game, the whole situation with Garl. First of all, his theme tune is through the roof. It's amazing. I love Garl's theme tune.
Yeah.
The way they kill him off, and it's done gradually, and then there's this whole big send-off with the dragon, and then he's buried in your hometown. Like, it's all just very emotional, very cinematic, very well done. I don't love multiple endings, but I totally understand that a game that's referencing Chrono Trigger so hard has to have a bajillion endings. I get that, and I know that. And the idea that you can... This is, I guess, spoilers on top of spoilers, but you can revive Garl through, like, post-game stuff.
Right, doing the true ending. And this is where I was like, wow, they really are just doing Chrono Trigger, because it is beat for beat. In Chrono Trigger, Chrono, quote-unquote, dies, and then you go and do a whole side quest, you bring Magus onto your team, and then you have to take a doll, you get a doll of Chrono, you then go back to the point in time when he dies to Lavos, you swap Chrono for the doll, and the doll gets destroyed. Simultaneously, there's a side quest with Robo, where Robo has to bury himself in the ground for like 1,000 years, so this land can be tilled, and you come back 1,000 years later and Robo's still there tilling the land. And so what they do is they take both of these storylines and they kind of combine them, where they take... is it Best is the name of the pink... The
B''ST,
B''ST, but Bust, I guess. So that character is essentially Robo in that they're like a man-made creation, or at least they're made of glass and like they exist within that thing, that kind of construction. So they are both the doll that gets Garl out of trouble by turning into him, but then also gets buried, not for 1,000 years, but for a significant amount of time, gets buried and then gets unburied so that you can bring them back into your party. Like, it's very clear. If it wasn't already obvious they were fans of Chrono Trigger, they just take the story and just do it themselves, which is, you know, to some degree, it's like, you could have had some more of your own ideas, but I get what they wanted to do there. And it's satisfying for fans of that game to see the way that they implemented it, at least.
I just think, yes, I got the Chrono Trigger links from like the main world in Sea of Stars, but it was when I went to like Surai's cyber world, I was like, man, the vibes of this game have just gone through the roof when it comes to like being like Chrono Trigger, because that's what I associate Chrono Trigger with.
It's like the when you first go to the future in Chrono Trigger, right? And the world is destroyed.
Exactly that. Yeah, and you're like, whoa, this game has because you're in the kind of the traditional fantasy world in Chrono Trigger, and then you go to the future, and it just tonally completely changes. And I mean, for a game from the 90s, that must have been mind-boggling at the time. But even Sea of Stars in 2023 from last year, like it's still really impressive when a whole setting can change like that. And it was really interesting listening to the director on that podcast talk about this game, because he's sort of making the really valuable point that in terms of art and music, we're not trying to replicate Chrono Trigger. We're trying to replicate people's memories of those types of games, because people have nostalgia for games like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, etc. I know I certainly played them way later, but even I have like some nostalgia, and that aim of creating something that is nostalgic means that the art and the music have to be through the roof. And that's what I think Sea of Stars does so well, is that it lives up, in my view, to the nostalgia of Chrono Trigger, not just replicate. Because if Sea of Stars has replicated Chrono Trigger's art style and music, it'd be a pretty good game, but I don't think it would live up in people's minds, because, you know, Chrono Trigger, as great as it is, has aged in certain ways, even though it is one of the best aging JRPGs, and I stand by that, as you've said before, MZ. But like, I do think that Sea of Stars is still massively improving on the art style, the music, like this kind of some of the cinematic bosses and cutscenes, and this kind of extra level of polish that, like, it's just one of the most polished classical JRPG experiences I've ever played. And you know, I probably still prefer Octopath Traveler 2. I think that game just does stuff that I'm generally more into, and I kind of love the segmentation of 8 stories. But
I agree. I prefer Octopath 2 to Sea of Stars personally.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's the thing is, neither of them are as good as Chained Echoes, and that's, you know.
Oh, that's the next one I have to play, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm interested what you think, because again, for me, like, Chained Echoes is such a step forward because it elevates these games mechanically, right? Like it just continues to it erases all the fluff of it, as I've said before, and that for me is what modernizing a JRPG looks like. Because as much as Sea of Stars is, you're right, modernizing stuff, it's still very, very adherent to, well, you have mana and you have to heal after every battle, and you have to do your item management, which to me I still find quite tedious as part of the genre.
I think it does have that, I won't deny that. I do think it's very light on that.
It's very light,
and compared to Octopath Traveler 2, which is heavy on the item management and the potions and the mana. Oh my god, like it's got a lot. But I think Sea of Stars is definitely trying, and the director said this in the podcast, like, he wanted all the numbers, like Paper Mario he referenced, he wanted all the numbers to be very low. Like, he doesn't want the numbers to just exponentially go to the thousands upon thousands of HP and mana and hundreds of, like, he wanted to try and keep everything low, which I did still feel by the end of the game. It just makes everything a bit more balanced.
Yeah, because it makes more of an impact when someone does 100 damage. Like, 100, that's a lot, you
exactly.
know? So, yeah, definitely makes an impact.
But yeah, I loved this game. It would have featured pretty high in my top 10 list from last year for sure.
I knew it. 100%. As soon as I started this game, I was like, Bally's going to love the fuck out of this game. Like, he's gonna.
Such a Bally game in a very Bally year. My God, what a Bally year. Like, I'm a sucker. And I think the success of this game, we're already in an era where lots of people are trying to recreate, like, kind of modern takes on 90s style JRPGs. And I'm here for it. I think some of the next ones I might play Chained Echoes. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D is coming at some point.
Hopefully this year.
This year. I'd love to play that. Would be my first Dragon Quest game. And then I do owe you one, MBZ, where I do need to try more 3D JRPGs. I'll play Rebirth. That's the next one, obviously. But after that, I definitely need to challenge myself and try some more RPGs, because it's a genre that is growing on me the more I play, and I think I've been careful as to the ones I've played, and I think I still need to be careful. I don't think I'm quite as keen on opening the net quite as wide as you have, MEZ, but like I need to carefully get my way through some more RPGs because I'm having a good time with them. Yeah,
that's great. That's really cool. So yeah, we'll see where that journey takes you, but this journey of the podcast is going to continue into our next segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after the break with some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is that time again. It's time for emails. We always put out the call we're going to put it out again. If you would like to email the show, please email ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We also have a Discord server. There's a channel on there called Emails. Join the community, get involved, and you can leave a comment, a question over there in that channel. Our first email is from a person called Everything Nintendo. So it must be good. I thought this was like a Twitter account, and then I realized that the Twitter account with all the news is called Nintendo Everything. So
that's right. Yes, you're correct.
This is their like alternate brother, Everything Nintendo. But they say, hey, this is a simple question, so I'll keep it short. If approached or given the opportunity, would you like to interview people related to Nintendo? Ex-employees, current employees, execs, and such.
Okay. I mean, this is interesting because I feel like whenever people from Nintendo are interviewed, there's often not a lot interesting that comes out of it because when they are interviewed, it's always, and I hear people talk about this a lot, people like Miyamoto, they are always being interviewed for a specific purpose, right? So like if you're interviewing Miyamoto for We Play, you can't ask him questions about Zelda. The PR person will be like, no, you got just only talk about this. You can only talk about this, right? And so I think traditionally, when it comes to that news cycle, journalists always get frustrated with Nintendo interviews because they want to ask these far more interesting questions, these questions that talk about Nintendo's history or are like trying to find things out. But because as a company, they are so on the PR beat, you always find yourself not being able to break through. So I guess the caveat here has to be like, you know, is this just once they've left the company or like are we able to just talk about anything? Because then it starts to get more interesting. Then you have an opportunity to get into the deeper stuff and get behind the scenes and maybe find out some stuff. But Nintendo naturally a very secretive company. So if you're interviewing someone who's working there right now, it's very unlikely that they actually give you anything of substance or anything that is interesting in any way because they want to protect the brand. They want to make sure that they're not saying anything bad or weird.
And we're a podcast, and the vast majority of Nintendo employees speak one language, and that language is not English, it's Japanese. So that's already a huge barrier. But yeah, and all the secrecy you've talked about. From a very like boring admin-y perspective, one thing I find that we have with the show is that it's really, as much as we enjoy it and we're good at producing the show, it's really difficult when we both work full-time jobs and we do this show in our spare time to do a lot of admin around the show and stuff like ads and guests and interviews and these kinds of things. Like, it's really actually difficult to just arrange that and have the headspace and the planning to do it. So but I mean, if anyone wants to come on and help us with some admin support, I'm sure that can be arranged. But like these sorts of things are very, very difficult to arrange. So we would really, as the questioner suggests, need them to reach out to us in most circumstances.
Yeah, I guess from a dream perspective, right? Like you have a chance to sit down with someone from Nintendo. Is there anyone in particular, Bally, that you'd be like, I would love to talk to this person and find out about this thing, or tell me about this project that you worked on, the story of how this game in particular was made. Anything like that kind of comes to mind for you?
It's less like how did this person come up with this thing, and more how did the Nintendo boardroom react to Pal World and stuff like real fly on the wall kind of like nerdy. How did the company respond to these things? Like
what are the conversations they have where they actually say the word PS5,
Well, exactly. And like what was their internal reactions to the success of the Mario film and stuff like that. Like it doesn't always have to be negative, but I'm just really interested in what are some of the knee-jerk reactions of executives and very senior people in the company. Because I think with the creative side of things, I think you really, really struggle to get any juicy stuff. And we've said before how Nintendo like to be a bit like Disney, where they're not inspired by anything from any other part of the industry. They just come up with these glorious examples of video games completely fully crafted out of their arse. Like it just comes out of them. There's no one else who contributed, And I think that trying to break down someone like, I don't know, Miyamoto or whoever, to say, oh yeah, actually I play loads of PlayStation and this is how that came about. Not that I think Miyamoto plays much PlayStation, but like I think that just that conversation is much more difficult.
Yeah, I see that totally. I think, so the podcast that we referenced previously in the Sea of Stars segment, the Game Maker's Notebook, I think is a really great podcast, and it gets into creators from all around the industry, but obviously like no one from Nintendo is ever gonna show up on that feed. But I think it's a good example of a way that you can approach an interview about the industry and developers and composers and all that sort of stuff, and just finding stuff out. I'd love to have someone from Nintendo, be it like, I honestly, like, I would love to hear from Koizumi. He feels like the person at Nintendo who would have the most to say and maybe be the most open potentially. Like,
and he's a lot more modern than like Miyamoto's
yes.
like takes on video games are pretty dated by now. When you actually think about it. And as we've said before, he's now the face of like the theme parks and the movies, and he's a lot less involved in the video game crafting, as it were, and the company itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like there's definitely been like stories in the past of like Koizumi snuck story into Mario Galaxy under Miyamoto's nose with the Rosalina storybook.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I would just love to hear the kind of internal back and forth about how that stuff works. And there's a lot of interesting things that he's been involved with that I think would be a good, like, let's take a look at this career and see what actually did he do behind the scenes on these projects, because you can only glean so much from a list in the credits, right, of a game, to understand what impact they had on a project or what they actually did. I'd love to I'd love to know like the decision making behind making Twilight Princess, right? Because Twilight Princess felt like such a reaction to the negative Wind Waker fan kind of sentiment, as well as the Ocarina of Time promise that fans desired. Like, there was, back in that era, there was it felt like it's that one moment where Nintendo listened to their fans and like directly reacted in that way. And for a lot of people, I would say lots of people don't love Twilight Princess, and they at the end of the day think it's worse than Wind Waker. I think
it's not aged the best.
Yeah, it's probably true at the end of the day, right? But like, how did Nintendo, who seemingly back then were just kind of marching to the beat of their own drum, decide to go in that direction? And how much is that tied up with their identity at the time of being like, well, we actually have to be a bit more like hardcore, and we brought in Reggie for this purpose, and like we have to start making dark games that are brooding and like make us feel more mature, because the GameCube is like being made fun of as like a lunchbox and stuff like that, right? Like what do we do to make that happen? I wonder how much of that factors into their decision making about greenlighting a game like Twilight Princess. So yeah, that'd be fascinating.
I think some of the discussions around some of the boldest games, but also the boldest hardware, so like just to be a fly on the wall with discussions around the Switch in a situation where the Wii U has failed. What does the next system look like? What does Nintendo creativity look like with their backs up against the walls from a hardware development perspective? Like, how do they come up with, because when you think about the video game landscape now, the Switch feels like an open goal. It's like, but why did we not think of that, and how come it hadn't really been done in the same way before 2017? When you think about it like that, 2017 is kind of a late time for a concept like the Switch to actually come into existence, arguably. Like, it's right. Just kind of how, and when you think about their history, and they've got people like Gunpei Yokoi who went from literally creating toys to inventing the Game Boy. It's like that level of creative jump and mental backflips that you just think, wow, I want to know some more about how these things came into existence, especially from like a hardware perspective, like, because it's just insane while you've got Xbox and PlayStation just making more powerful boxes that do the same thing as the previous generation.
Yeah. I think the only insight that we really get to Nintendo at that time, or like what was happening, was the rare Westerners who worked there during that period.
All three of them.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I would point people to MinMax, where Ben Hansen has gone and interviewed folks like Giles Goddard, who obviously worked on the original Star Fox with Miyamoto and worked on, like, 1080 and, like, a bunch of projects within Nintendo from a British guy's perspective, and the stories that they have of, like, working with those teams and what happened. It's really the only way we can get that story, again, because of the language barrier to some degree, but also, like, there's so few people who are willing to talk about that stuff in an open way, because I don't think from a cultural perspective Japanese folks tend to do that either, right? So it's a rare opportunity, and I think those are really interesting interviews for sure. And you know, I'd love to see Danny O'Dwyer be able to pull off a Nintendo documentary. It feels like Nintendo, their own history is such a weird thing. They're doing that museum, which hopefully I'll get to see when I go to Japan this year,
which I would predict will be incredibly surface level, but
I agree,
will still be much deeper than anything else we've really had access to, because there isn't much else.
Better than not having anything, right? But yeah, I think the other interesting part of this is like Nintendo of America, and obviously the Kit and Krista stuff has been super fascinating, really, where they are illuminating some behind the scenes things of how the marketing side of Nintendo of America worked and how much they were involved in decisions and how much they knew about beforehand and all that sort of stuff. I think
because as much as they weren't inside the building and building bricks of like NCL, they still were in touch with Japan a lot and understanding what was Japan saying about, you know, I thought it was something that Japan was stressing about. I can't remember. I think it was like Mario appear, or was it Zelda appearing on one of the talk shows or something, and there was that clip. I can't remember what it was. Some clip that was referencing Mario or Zelda went viral, and it was referenced on a talk show in the States, and apparently NCL just like lost their shit and was like, you need to write us up a paper about this appearance, and right now.
Oh, I think it was the SNL skit, was it? Something like that, right?
Yes.
Where they
can't remember if it was Mario Zelda.
I think it was a Mario SNL skit before the movie or something like that, right?
Was it pre? I think it might have been pre the Mario film coming out.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was just like, there's really interesting cultural differences where something that is very much like, oh, we're just making fun of it in America, is incredibly serious in Japan, and we are very serious Japanese businessmen, and this is not a laughing matter. You are, you know, and it's like, but legally,
I wonder how parody is treated in Japan, because
very interesting point, right?
I know that sarcasm doesn't really I mean, it exists, but people don't use sarcasm, and it's very difficult.
I mean, sarcasm doesn't even reach across the Atlantic, MBZ.
That's true.
The Pacific.
But yeah, it's definitely a wild world going on there. So yeah, I think it would be very cool to interview some of these people, but I think I question how much value you can really get out of it unless they are truly like, they've left the company behind, they're not going back. And I can't remember who it was. I think it's the guy who worked on Tomato Adventure, maybe it was. And Ben Hansen interviewed that guy as well, because he was an ex-Nintendo guy also. So there's a few niche creators out there, few people who have left the company who you can get some insight from. But yeah, they're quite rare these days. One day, hopefully, Nintendo's history will fully be told, and someone will get the full scoop on it. And we'll learn a lot, and we'll learn a great deal. But
I think also because they are just so mysterious, when you do get those tidbits, they're just extra juicy, because that's some good knowledge right there. That's some good knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
Our next email is from Wicked Gamer UK Alan, who says, and this is a little bit old, this email, hey Bally and MBZ, I'm so excited for this weekend because I'm spending Sunday at EGX. It's always great to be around a community of gamers. Did either of you attend this year? If so, what did you play? Did you attend any panel discussions? And when is the ThisNintendoLife panel going to feature at a future EGX? Here's my questions. If ThisNintendoLife was in charge of curating the NSO lineup for the GBA, SNES, and Mega Drive, What 3 games would you choose as must-have games on each console that aren't already available? Imagine there is no licensing challenges and all options are on the table. Thanks for all the great content and keep up the great work. Wicked Gamer UK, Alan.
Lovely. Well, yes, I in fact did go to EGX. So I did attend both for work and for fun. I had a look at yeah, sure, I guess. I think EGX is interesting. It's there's not a huge amount to do there, if I'm honest. I actually did play Octopia Eastward, the DLC that we talked about today at EGX, so that's kind of an interesting link. And there were a few other things that were there. They had the Like a Dragon Gaiden, as well as Infinite Wealth demos. Those are kind of the biggest ones. The biggest one was Mario Wonder, actually. So that was the thing that most people were lining up for and had the most booth for people to play. So in terms of big games, there's actually not a huge number of big games available, but there's a lot of kind of stalls where you can buy merchandise, like a lot of anime expos I think are like that, where it's mainly just an excuse for people to spend money on merch, expensive things, that sort of stuff, but there are panels. So there was one that folks I was hanging out with, they went and watched I think it was the Banjo-Kazooie panel, or at least the people who worked on the Banjo games coming back together. So Grant Kirkhope was there and stuff like that. And there's a few other ones, like Ben Starr from Final Fantasy 16. He has a D&D group called Natural Six that they did a Kickstarter for. They did a live version of that show, the kind of first thing they'd ever done live with it. They did at EGX as well. So panels are a cool thing there, but I didn't really go to any of them. I wasn't there kind of long enough to find stuff that I was interested. I think the ones I was interested in had already happened by the time that I got there. So yeah, it's an okay show. I don't think it's anything worth doing for the pure aspect of going to play stuff, because to be frank, there's not a lot of new stuff often to play there, and it's just a weird side effect of my job is that I go there and all the indie games, all the indie booths are games that I have played for work already, or I have already assessed and stuff like that, and but other publishers have taken them. So it's a little bit of a weird one where I find if I was not in this job, I would be far more interested in going just check out new indie games, right? That's a cool thing to do, but I already do it for work and I've already played a lot of them. So it's a bit of a different experience. So I would say it's a fun thing to do, to just hang out with friends and just go around and play some retro stuff if you want. They have Smash Brothers setups and those types of things, which would be cool. But Bally, have you been to any other kind of conferences or events like this aside from when we went to Gamescom and the other one that we did in London?
But I'd love to set up a panel if we could.
Oh sure, yeah.
I think it's tricky because I think obviously we don't have the biggest listener base, but obviously we have a listener base. It's just they're very much spread across the entire globe, and it's about where could we do something that would bring together some people. And I guess London EGX is definitely one of those options. But I was thinking maybe in our next survey we could see if there were a hub that we would meet together as a TNL community, and then maybe it could be between somewhere West Coast, somewhere East Coast, London maybe. I can't think of another one, but
yeah.
Scandinavia, Germany, somewhere. I don't know, but yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I think that I'd like to go to some more of these events at some point in the future. But yeah, they do get a little bit weird with my job stuff, but it's still fun. Still fun to hang out and go to them. But yeah, I guess onto the NSO stuff, Bally.
Yes.
So I feel like we've got a decent number of things on there now.
We do,
but there's definitely room for improvement. There's definitely stuff that would be good to see on there. And I feel like I'm always in the camp of wanting to play stuff that I've not played before. So I guess must-have games is interesting, because there's definitely personal must-have games of they've got to be on there. But I don't know if this is asking more of games that aren't already on there at the moment, because a lot of my must-have games are on there.
I think the implication was not on there.
Okay.
That aren't already available.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But it's interesting because I think a lot of the ones that I want to play, I wouldn't necessarily call them must-have games. I'd call them more like NBZ curiosities of like, I want to play like Klonoa, the GBA version, you know? Like shit like that where no one's ever going to upload that to the service, but I want to play it, and it's a thing, you know? So it's like, I would treat this more for me as like, what are the 3 GBA games that I want to play that I want them to put on there, basically, in some senses. Same for the Super Nintendo and Mega Drive, I guess. But yeah, Bally, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Super Nintendo lineup in particular is incredibly JRPG weak. Like, we've talked earlier on the show about Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger. Those are 2 standouts. They've not even got the original Super Mario RPG on there, I believe. Like, it's...
No, because that would also not contradict, but it would mean people would play that instead of buying the new version, so they're incentivized to not put it on there because of that reason, right?
It's a bit like when they kind of removed Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze from the Wii U eShop when it came out on Nintendo Switch. They just for one removed it. It's really dodgy behavior. But I just think it is a very weak JRPG list from the Super Nintendo perspective. But yeah, I my knowledge of like Super Nintendo games is a lot weaker than yours, MBZ. So I don't know. What else?
I would say like it'd be cool to see Breath of Fire on there. The Breath of Fire series is like another classic RPG set of games that I feel like they don't get talked about that much. But there are a lot of them, and I remember playing Breath of Fire on the GBA, like one of the, I think maybe Breath of Fire 2 remade on GBA, I think that's what it was, in university classes. Like this was when I was just on Visual Boy Advance. I think that's what it's called, the emulator. That emulator I played so much in university classes where I just wasn't paying attention to lectures and was just playing emulated stuff on my laptop. So that's definitely a series that I think I would like to see. I don't think, maybe there is a Breath of Fire on. This is the problem. Quite a few things have been added at this point to the Super Nintendo Online that it's hard to know like which ones are not on there. I definitely I think for me, getting the Quintet games on there is super important. So Illusion of Gaia, obviously Terranigma, those are classics that have never really got the limelight, and I think that they should be on there. The only reason I would say they wouldn't is if they were to do like a standalone collection of those as a trilogy. But I don't see that happening necessarily. So Terranigma especially is like a mythical game for a lot of people because it never came out in North America. It was the rare RPG that was only in Europe and Japan. Where for the most part, America got Chrono Trigger and they got Final Fantasy VI and all these RPGs that Europe never got. Terranigma is that one enigma that only Europe got, and North America didn't. So I feel like for that reason, it's a little less thought of by, people like Nintendo of America. They probably don't have any control over what goes on these systems, but if they were to, then I don't think they would go to Terranigma. But that would probably be on mine in terms of a Super Nintendo. If I was to do 3 for Super Nintendo, I probably would do the 3 Quintet games.
Right.
That probably would be a good choice. But I also would love to see games that only came out in Japan that were never localized. There's a lot of RPGs like that, like Tengai Makyo Zero, of which I have the GBA game and the Super Nintendo both loaded up on my Steam Deck. Treasure Hunter G is another one. There's lots of like very niche, unknown.
I feel like you're just showing off to Capsule J at the moment.
Look, I'm trying, okay? There's the Ogre Battle games. There's March of the Black Queen. Again, a lot of the Ogre Battle games are named after Queen songs, is a thing that you'll find, which is fun. Bahamut Lagoon, obviously. Bahamut Lagoon's a big one. So I would say for me, must-have Super Nintendo games are basically all the Japanese RPGs that were never translated or localized for the West, which is a hard ask because I can play them now because they all have fan translations, but I don't think Nintendo or the companies who originally made these games are willing to put in the effort or the time or the work to translate them, and so likely they just put them on the Japanese service and never localize them for any other region. So that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, there's also a bunch of Konami games on Super Nintendo, like
Yes.
The Contra games would be awesome. Right. There's like none of those. So
Castlevania stuff. It's because they have them in collections, right? That's the thing. They decided to sell collections instead. Same with Capcom and Mega Man, right? They're like, let's do 20 different collections and we'll make way more money doing that than Nintendo's pittance.
Because Nintendo are too damn slow to roll out like all the functionality on the Switch Online. Yeah. It's wild.
I would say the Mega Drive is pretty well represented. There's like 30, 40 Mega Drive games on the Super Nintendo Online, and like stuff like Shining Force, which is something I'd love to get into because Shining Force is a prototypical Fire Emblem in a way. It's a, one of the original tactics RPGs. I'd love to play a Shining Force game, get into that. I'm more interested in the Saturn, if I'm honest. Saturn is one of those systems that like I just don't know enough about, and so I've started to get into Saturn. I've downloaded a bunch of Saturn games on Steam Deck. I've been playing Radiant Silvergun, again, another before bed game. Radiant Silvergun is like known as one of the greatest shmups of all time, and is fucking impossible. It is like one of the hardest games I have ever played. It's so I can barely get past the second level to the boss, and as soon as I get to the boss I just die instantly. So I'm trying to make my way through Radiant Silvergun. I feel like I'm gonna have to cheat at some point and like find a cheat to play that. There's a few on here like Shining the Holy Ark, Burning Rangers, the Darius games. Again, a lot of shmups on the Saturn. Saturn is a really interesting system because it was a powerhouse at 2D, but in an era where 2D was falling out of fashion. So like Sega made a bet of like, the Saturn's going to be killer because all these 2D games are going to look amazing. And then along comes PlayStation, is like, actually, we're going to do 3D now. So suck that. And Saturn kind of flopped because of that reason, which was a real shame. I think Dreamcast would also be very cool to have, but yeah, I don't think Nintendo are quite there in terms of supporting those systems. But I don't think there is kind of 3 must-have Mega Drive games for me, because the Mega Drive, I've played some Mega Drive stuff, but I feel like Dynamite Headdy, I believe, is a Mega Drive game. I think that's probably one that would be quite interesting. A treasure game as well, that would be quite good to go to. But yeah, GBA. Barley, do you have any GBA games that stand out for you?
I love the Mario Sports games. I just never got into the Mario Sports games on Game Boy Advance. So like golf and tennis, apparently both of those games have pretty good like RPG modes on them, and I'd love to play both of those. And also stuff like, again, like the Konami problem, Crazy Racers. Like, what a great Mario Kart clone, which is actually much more fun than Super Circuit. I know a lot of Mario Kart fans would argue Super Circuit's at the lower end of the Mario Kart tiers, and I would totally agree. So definitely need those people to try Crazy Racers, because it's a very good like arcade racer for sure.
Yeah, that stuff's definitely going to be hard to show up on the system. I think that's the struggle of these third parties, is like, what if we re-release Crazy Racers on our own instead of like doing it on the service? I'd
also say stuff like the Game Boy Advance version of Link to the Past and stuff like that.
Might be
a little bit more playable than the original.
I think that's the kind of thing Nintendo does, right? Because they have been releasing like, here's Mario Advance 2, Yoshi's Island and stuff like that,
Yeah, but they've not done it for Zelda for some reason, so.
No, yeah, that is weird, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, for me, I've talked about I'm playing Donkey Kong King of Swing, but that would be cool to see on there, because that is like a weird niche Nintendo game that never saw much love from anybody. I feel like Donkey Kong is one of those series they used to be very experimental with, and now Kirby's kind of taken that mantle. But yeah, King of Swing is a weird one. Obviously, Square Enix are not going to do this, but I personally prefer the look of the GBA versions of the Final Fantasy games as opposed to the pixel remasters. And the problem is they have the pixel remasters for 1 through 6, so there's literally no reason for Square Enix to say, oh yeah, let's put these GBA versions onto the GBA thing for Switch Online, because they're not going to get sales for the one they want to sell on the eShop instead. But I would much prefer to play those, because they're just, for my sensibilities, I prefer the sprite art from a GBA perspective than the kind of new redone pixel art that they have there. So those would be high on my list. Then even stuff like Tactics Advance, like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, the game I would like to get into. I didn't get on with the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but I feel like if you put it on GBA, then suddenly I'm just more interested in it, just because it's GBA. I just prefer GBA stuff generally. I just love pixel art on GBA. I just love the style, the visual fidelity of that system, and the way it does stuff. And then there's just some weird stuff like Did you ever play Banjo Pilot, Bally? Like the racing, flying banjo game on GBA?
I remember it in magazines. I don't think I ever played it.
Okay. But yeah, like there's a couple of banjo games on GBA that came out. Grunty's Revenge is another one that's basically like a kind of isometric Banjo-Kazooie game. And these came out in a era post-Rare having been acquired by Microsoft, I believe.
I think you're right, which is really weird.
Yeah.
Microsoft making strange business decisions even back then.
Oh yeah, exactly, absolutely. So yeah, I think there's definitely some weird ones, and to be fair, I've mainly just been on my Steam Deck reading off the games I have downloaded, because these are the ones I'm interested in, right? And that's why I have downloaded them onto my system already. Because I would like to play them at some point, and Nintendo's just not going to do that. I mean, Mother 3, I've got Mother 3 loaded up here, right? I've got Klonoa and Klonoa 2, the GBA Klonoa games. Both Golden Suns I have on here. Thankfully, Nintendo fixed that problem, and now those Golden Sun games I don't have to play on my Steam Deck. I can play on my Switch instead. But yeah, I think that's a good kind of selection. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of must-have games on these consoles, but the must-have games are also the ones I've already played, and I don't want to play again, you know? So yeah, I think it's probably a good run through of some stuff for those systems. But yeah, I feel like I personally want to fill a gap in my Sega knowledge generally, so that's why I've been diving into some Saturn stuff and hopefully Dreamcast in the future. But yeah, I have played a good amount of Mega Drive stuff, because I went through an era of when they released the Mega Drive app on the Switch Online. I did play through stuff like Shinobi, and we played Rise Star for the show, and I also played there was another one. I can't remember it now, but
the Ninja one.
Shinobi is the Ninja one, but there was like another one. I can't remember. Yeah, but there's definitely, I've played like maybe 6 or 7 Mega Drive games on there. Super Valis 4 I played as well. Like a couple of the shmups. Operation Musha I think I played. So there's a few Mega Drive games I've actually gone through on that system. The ones that I never get to are the longer ones, right? So Shining Force, because it's like 20-40 hours long, it's a far harder, like I remember I think I played Musha on one sit of the toilet. So I was sitting on the toilet and I finished it in a single dump. I finished that game. So those games are much easier to approach for stuff like Mega Drive and Super Nintendo, because you're like, oh, I can knock it out in half an hour or an hour, versus Shining Force, which is like, well, that's a commitment, man. I have to pay attention to this. So one day I will get around to them. As we will with many things. But I think that's going to do us. Bally, where can people send their fine emails to be answered on this show?
Please send your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And we look forward to hearing from you and all the things that you have to send us. But we have come to the end here, so it's time to get on and out and plug some stuff and tell you about some things. Can obviously go and support this show if you would like to by heading over to patreon.com/thisnintendolife and get bonus episodes and extra additional stuff that we give to you. And Bally would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier plus patrons. They are Zach S, Thomas, Matthew, Albert, Wicked Gamer UK, Alan, Turtle, and that old guy Ali T. He's still hanging around. So thank you all for your support.
Update on the Ali T saga. We had a chat with Ali T the other day.
We had a chat.
We did. Talked it out. We figured out that he, for some reason, is listening to the show. Maybe against his own will. I don't know if someone's holding him at a gunpoint, but he is doing it. So we appreciate it. So shout out to Ali T.
He's listening to all the content. He's listening to bonus bits. He's listening to this Nintendo Life.
Crazy.
He just wants to celebrate TNL. It's great.
Yeah, I was trying to tell him stuff, and he was like, yeah, I know, I listened to the podcast, so I know about that already. I'm like, God damn it, Ali T. Stealing anecdotes from me, you know?
He beat Witcher 3 in like a month.
Yeah, he's a fucking madman. Yes. Great.
You think me and MBZ are pretty hardcore with the number of games we play, and we admit we play more than Ali T, but when he puts his mind to something, like, he is unstoppable. Like, he is doing all-nighters, back-to-back days. He's kind of ruthless with his game playing when he puts his mind to it.
Yeah, 100%. So shout out to that. I'm glad that he enjoyed Witcher 3, because it is one of the great games of all time, and I'm excited for you to eventually get to it, Bally. But it's a long ass video game. It's very, very
fun. What's there? There's nothing wrong with a long fun game.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Obviously, you can find the show in various places. We're on Twitter at TNL Podcast, where you can go and find out stuff about what's going on. And you can obviously go to that place to just get updates and see what we're doing. You can find me at Lord MBZ, also NBZ on Blue Sky and Lord NBZ on Threads. I shouldn't have taken at NBZ on Blue Sky, because now I have to clarify that it is that as opposed to being consistent across all of them. So despite the fact that I did get the actual 3-letter name for the first time since maybe like the early 2000s, where you could get away with that, it's not serving me well anymore, Bally.
That's pretty cool you got MBZ. I don't think I was able to get Bally. So, sounds like, I guess Bally's more popular than MBZ. Who knows? But
yeah, damn it.
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And I'm clever and also pick that same name on Blue Sky, so you can find me on there.
Great. You can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher. You can download us in any podcasting app that you have. Just search for This Nintendo Life and subscribe, and then you get it into your feed without having to think about it. It's beautiful. It's lovely. It's amazing. And I think that's it.
It's a bit slow on the Nintendo front with the video game releases right now. They've got like Mario vs. Donkey Kong coming out. That classic that you love so much, MBZ.
You would not catch me dead playing that video game ever again.
It's like eating steak with a spoon. I think
classic.
The quote we associate with that game.
Absolutely. And I expect them to have not changed anything about it, because it's one of those Nintendo remakes where they're like, it looks better, still plays like shit, still plays the same as it used to. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting for people to go back to today. And anyone who says it's good, I will think less of them as a person.
Because it's probably going to be one of those remakes where it's mechanically identical, but it's just had a glow up, right?
Yeah, that's my assumption.
Well, I actually really liked the game, so I know there must be some of us out there.
So it explains how I've just always looked down on Bally. It's just because he has that opinion, So
yeah. I think like the next game we might be interested in is Peach on Switch, right? Is that?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to be into some Princess Peach Showtime, I should say. So that's March, I should say. It's March. So
yeah, but obviously you've got Rebirth coming soon, so that's going to be a lot of Nintendo goodness.
Yeah, but yeah, there's lots of other stuff to play in the meantime. I've got 700 JRPGs to finish, so that's it's fun for me. But we'll be back.
A cult to murder.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more video gaming, some more podcasting, some more Nintendo. Until then, thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Octopia from Octopia, the Eastward DLC. Copyright Pixpill 2024.